an emergency fund is very different for new immigrants. Now, over time, there are two other things that you will need to take care of. So before I go into those details, one of the things is that once you have this initial setup as a new immigrant, what you need to look at is what are your goals in the next 5 years and how are you going to improve your finances. But as a new immigrant, your situation will be different. If you have just come in, or if you have, let's say, moved in the last few months, then you may not have the that financial stability to save up 6 months of emergency fund. If you have been following any finance gurus who is not so tuned to the challenges of a new immigrant, then you will see here a very good advice. Times have changed, especially in the US. If you are a new immigrant, then your situation will be vastly different than a normal person who had been living in the US for a long time. In this video, I'm going to give you very practical steps on how to build resilience in your finances. In other words, how to build very effective emergency fund, because without that, it will be very difficult for you to adapt to the changing circumstances, the changing immigration laws that may be ahead of us with the new government. And also there's a lot of volatility in the job market today and volatility in interest rates and so on. So it is very important that we have a good resilience in our finances as relatively new immigrants. I have been there as a new immigrant since 2017. So it's been 7 years I'm here, but I have already faced the challenges that you may be facing today. And especially under the same government, when I moved in 2017, there was a change in government and the same government is in place now. And for whatever it is worth, good or bad, there will be changes in immigration laws. And I have gone through all of those. And today, as a financial coach and tech professional, I help immigrants go from financial uncertainty to clarity with actionable steps. Through my coaching, my clients feel confident about their financial future and can focus on what they do best and instead spend least amount of time in managing their finances. All right, so let's get started. So what does emergency fund mean to you? Now, if you have been reading finance books, or if you have been following any finance gurus who is not so tuned to the challenges of new immigrant, then you will see here a very good advice, which is have 3 to 6 months of your expenses as saved up in a liquid savings account or CDs, and this should be your emergency fund. Now, this is really good because for most people this will do. And this is a good, what I call is a rule of thumb. But as a new immigrant, your situation will be different in many different ways. First of all, if you have just come in, or if you have, let's say, moved in the last few months, then you may not have the that financial stability to save up 6 months of emergency fund or 6 months of expenses as emergency fund, because in the initial months you will have a lot of expenses. Your budget will be very volatile. You will have to buy a car. You will have to maybe put a large deposit on your rent. You maybe rents are very unsustainable in your area and it might be better to buy a home. So you might be saving up for the down payment of that. So in a nutshell, there are a lot of initial expenses where immediately saving up 3 to 6 months of your expenses may be a difficult task. Yes, over time, over a year or you will get there. So one of the things that is unique to new immigrants and which I always work with my clients is to start with at least $5,000 to $10,000 as your initial seed money for emergency fund. Now, where did I get this number, $5,000 to $10,000? Now, you'll see that one of the rule of thumb or one of the ways to arrive at this is if you look at your health insurance, maybe it is provided by your employer, and you see how much deductible you have there. Some people have a high deductible health insurance plan because they can also make use of something called a health savings account, which is a very good investment vehicle for the long term. And I do recommend to clients if they are relatively healthy and can afford the high deductible. So that high deductible plan, typically it goes into a few thousand. So that's why having a $5,000 to $10,000 in your emergency fund will help you in case there is a medical emergency where you have to pay this out of pocket. The second thing is that if you are running a car, then sometimes, yes, most of the small car repairs may come within say $1,000. but sometimes they can be more expensive also, and it also depends on what kind of car are you driving as your first vehicle. And if it's a very expensive car, then of course the maintenance will also be expensive, so you need to keep that in mind. And then the third thing is that it should give you some form of liquidity, because sometimes you may, even because initially your budgets are very volatile, so this should also act as a kind of a slush fund in your close to your checking account, where let's say in some of the months you did not anticipate a large expense, or you have to travel back to your home country due to some initial setup issues or some family issues. And what this causes is that again you will need some cash on the side, and so till you are very clear about your budget and you know what you are going to save, so this $5,000 to $10,000 is a good starting point for all of these various reasons that I mentioned: your deductible coverage, any kind of breakdown in your car, or let's say if you are renting and you need to pay something. And the third thing that we discussed is having a slush fund in case you overspend one of the months, or there's some uncertainty in your monthly budget. So really this is the crux of why an emergency fund is very different for new immigrants. Now, over time, there are two other things that you will need to take care of. So before I go into those details, one of the things is that once you have this initial setup as a new immigrant, what you need to look at is what are your goals in the next 5 years, and how are you going to improve your finances. This is where I have a 4-step guide. You can go to the link in the description below and download this 4-step guide. It's a very simple, customizable process that you can follow in your finances. It starts from financial awareness or financial reboot, where you take a look at where you are starting from. The second is where you want to go. That's your financial plan in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, as a new immigrant, we don't want to think too far ahead, because you are in a changing scenario. Your life is going to change as you settle down, discover new things, and your career or your finances will take different shapes. So that's why we don't want to think beyond 3 to 5 years. The second thing is within 3 to 5 years, we have much clarity in our goals, that how much money do we need. Maybe you want to buy a home, you want to save money for your kids' college, or you want to go on a vacation, you want to travel back to your home country. All of these are very tangible goals within the next 5 years. So that's why that's the second step in that 4-step guide. The third one is that once you articulate your goals, how are you going to set up a very simple budget that does not take more than 15 minutes of your time every week. So remember, it's like weekly 15 minutes. It should not be that every day you are having to track your expenses. So that's the financial flow step. And then finally, it comes to financial growth, that how do you want to become financially successful in the US? And I have used this 4-step for my own financial growth in the last 7 years. And I have gone from almost starting my finances from scratch in the US to a net worth that I would not have imagined even 5 years back. So it's all about the discipline and following a very structured process. And if you want to know about that process, then go to the link in the description below and download that 4-step guide. Okay, back to the emergency fund situation. So once we have settled this $5,000 to $10,000 for the reasons I mentioned, the second level of your emergency fund is what the conventional advice is. Now, it could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Now, how do you decide what is good for you? And is it like 3, 6, or 12 months of your regular household expenses, or should it take other expenses that happens throughout the year but not necessarily monthly, or should it be your take-home pay? So that's a decision that you have to make, that what kind of lifestyle or what kind of peace of mind do you want? For example, if you just think that, okay, I'm just going to cover my essential expenses, that means my fixed expenses, I should be able to pay my utility bills, my rent, and maybe you have some debt payments like a car loan payment, and then you have a rough estimate of how much your very, very essential expenses like groceries, gas, and so on. And you add all of these up and you say, okay, this is my minimum expenses that I need to have in a month. And then you multiply that by 3 or 6 or 12. And we'll come to that, how to decide 3, 6 or 12. So the first thing is that what is your minimum atomic number that you want to count as your monthly expenses on which you can live. Now, for some people, this constraint number may not be the right one because they want some flexibility in their finances, even in case of an emergency where you may be already dealing with a difficult situation. You don't want to cut down on some of the lifestyle expenses. So that means the second thing to consider could be that can I add a little bit of lifestyle expenses to that, maybe another 10 or 20% to that budget, and then use that as my emergency fund multiplier. And what it does is that even in case of an emergency, if you have that 6 months or 12 months, then you know that you don't have to cut down to the bare necessities, which can become very difficult because our expenses are not always predictable. Life happens, and sometimes we also, when we are into a difficult situation, we would also like to have something outside the box, something that will boost up our mood and things like that. So that's why having a little bit more flexibility is very important. The third thing could be that, which is the most flexible, and I think this is a good target to have, is actually take your take home pay. Because it's like in an emergency, if you lose your job or something happens to your income, then it's like saying that, okay, my income stream is not going to stop for the next 3, 6 or 12 months. And that's why that is a higher target, but it's also a much safer target to go for. So once you establish this, that what is the target that you are going to choose depending on your preference, your lifestyle, and how much you can control your expenses, the next thing is to decide that whether it should be 3, 6 or 12 months. And it again depends on what kind of industry you are in, how secure do you feel in your job, how confident you are that if you lose your job for some reason, you are going to get the next job within a defined period of time. For example, if your skill sets are in high demand, if you are a young professional and you know that you will be hired very quickly then maybe 3 months is a good number. 6 months could be a middle ground for a mid-career professional because it may take a while. Sometimes in your mid-career, you are already in a position, you already have a salary bar. So even if you are getting new opportunities, they may not fit into the role that you would like to have, or they may not fit into, or you may not be getting the kind of pay that you are expecting in your next jump. So it may take a little bit of iterations. And so having that 6 months of buffer, or rather your take-home pay, gives you that flexibility to wait out for the best opportunity, and that you are not just grabbing out of panic the first opportunity that came your way. And then the 12-month one is what I recommend for career transition. So if you are moving to a completely different industry, or you are, let's say, maybe you are thinking of starting your business, or maybe you are trying to do something that will actually have a much bigger disruption in your income stream or in your finances. In that case, having a 12-month cushion is good for mental peace, but actually essential, because when you are transitioning to a new career, to something new, then you don't know how it is going to pan out. Maybe you'll not be a good fit in that. It's kind of a huge experiment that you are doing with your career, with your life, and you have to have that buffer to support that experiment. So make sure that you decide which band you fall into. If you are into a rolling career where you can quickly get into another job, or then of course your 3 months of expenses should be good enough, and 3 months of take home pay is even better. Again, if you're a mid-career professional where you may have to choose and need some time, then maybe 6 months is good enough. And then if you are doing a complete career pivot or a transition, then a 12-month. So that's the second level of emergency funding. The third level is also related to when you are having to make a big career transition, or let's say you go through immigration and you get your green card. Now you're eligible to start a business, and you have a passion within you which is different than what you are doing in your job. Now, it does not mean that tomorrow you just leave your job and start following your passion, because that may be detrimental to your overall financial future in the US, because the reality is that 9 out of 10 startups fail. So if you're thinking of doing a startup, you need that cushion in your finances to be able to give yourself time. And typically statistics say that it takes at least 2 to 3 years, rather more than 3 years, for a startup to actually start making money, or that business to become viable, where you'll start having regular customers and you'll be paid and your expenses will be lesser than what you are investing in the business. So sorry, what you're getting as revenue. So you'll be in the kind of positive cash flow zone. And even then, most businesses nowadays, you'll see that they go cash flow negative for many years. So in your own personal finance, even though you are a business owner, maybe you are raising money for your venture, but at the same time, your own finances have to have much more resilience than that 1 year career transition we talked about. It should have at least 3 years of take home pay saved up. And again, 3 years of take home pay saved up in a cash like investment might be good in CDs and all, if you can afford that and you don't mind kind of earning very low returns on that. But if you are very close to making that transition, then keeping it in cash is better, because you don't want to take the risk of the stock market. Otherwise, if you know that you are going to make this transition, or you are going to try this in the next 2 to 3 years, then you can keep it in a little bit of conservative investments in a taxable brokerage account. But really think about this third level of this thing, third level of emergency funding. And it is not necessary that at this point you are thinking about a different passion and you are going to jump into something. Maybe you are already happy with your job, but still building this cushion is very useful in very conservative investments in a taxable brokerage account, because it gives you a lot of flexibility. At some point, let's say your industry changed, and we know today's tech industry is so volatile. Some companies may suddenly change their business model, they may go through a downturn, they may fire people. So you never know that even if today you are high flying, you are doing well, but tomorrow your situation may be completely 180-degree. So for that, at that time, you may discover that you actually want to do something, or in the same field, you just want to start something of your own. So whether you are in that mindset today or not, I would say that consider having a taxable brokerage account in your financial plan, and target to save up at least 3 years of your take home pay, or at least 3 years of your expenses. So these 3 levels of emergency fund, the first one was $5,000 to $10,000 of emergency fund. The second level is that 3 months, 6 months, 12 months while you are in your job, but you are kind of guarding any kind of uncertain transitions that you may have to make. And then the final level is where you are actually preparing for something for your passion down the line, even if you are not too serious about following that today. But there will be a time when you may need that flexibility, you may need that, you will crave for that independence. So I hope that this was really useful to you in planning emergency fund. And now you know that why emergency fund planning for a new immigrant is very different than a normal advice of like just having 6 months of expenses. And again, if you'd like to have a very structured form of improving your finances from where you are today to take your dreams and actions into account, then download that 4-step guide from the link in the description below. That will really give you a framework of how I coach my clients, how I have used it in my own finances to improve myself. And today I see that it generates results for my clients as well. So thank you for listening. If you like this video, please click the like button below and subscribe to my channel. That way I will be able to reach more immigrants like you and be able to serve them with very actionable financial steps. Thank you very much.